Welcome everyone to another session of TTR. Today our featured discussion is Remixed or Reimagined, the Future of Museums. If you haven't already, please go ahead and take a second and sign in. That QR code that's posted up here on the display and posted around the room is your sign-in for today. If you have any questions about any of it, feel free to hang out at the end of the session today and let us know. To read today's article, you can go to go.fiu.edu/TTR1025. Again, that's go.fiu.edu/TTR1025. So that article, because every Tuesday Times Roundtable is inspired by or linked to a New York Times article, that article is today's sessions. And that is because the New York Times gives us, the FIU community, a free digital subscription to the New York Times. So if you haven't already activated that, you can do so at accessnyt.com, right? So if you're going to go.fiu.edu/TTR1025, hitting a paywall, that means you haven't activated yet. accessnyt.com. If you are a medallion student or an Enacting Global Learning micro-credential student, make sure to take a screenshot of the confirmation page of your sign-in for your points log. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about when I say those things, those are the flagship undergraduate programs from the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. If you would like to know more, you can join us at our info sessions. You can find those at go.fiu.edu/GLinfo on the first and last Wednesday of every month. This week, actually tomorrow, right, we have a GL Info session on the Millennium Fellowship Program, which is quasi-sponsored by our office, supported by our office. If you want to learn more about that, that's tomorrow at 6 p.m., go.fiu.edu/GLinfo. Speaking of Millennium Fellows, we are currently promoting one of our Millennium Fellows event for her project. This event is going to be called Between Feminism and History, Women in the Haitian Revolution. It will be Wednesday, November 9th from 2 to 3 p.m. Go.fiu.edu/Haitian Women is where you can find the registration for that. This is for her Millennium Fellowship Research Project exploring the women in the Haitian Revolution. Also, we've got a double session this week, a special session of TTR happening tomorrow, where we'll have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, student voices from Western Ukraine. This will be a fully online session of TTR happening at 11 a.m., where we'll host students and faculty currently living in Western Ukraine, and they're going to talk to us about their experiences in education and their lives as they live through the current conflict in that region. The registration for that is go.fiu.edu/Ukraine. And for today, a reminder that TTR is the Office of Global Learning Initiative's flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends. As we engage throughout the session today, we ask that everyone use the microphones so that we can hear your perspectives in discussion at the end of the day. This is a discussion series, so we've got some roaming mics. When we have that, please make sure that you speak into that. And please join me today in welcoming our very special lead for this session. Amy Galpin is the Chief Curator at the Frost Art Museum at our very own Florida International University here on the MMC campus. Amy Galpin received her MA in Latin American Studies from San Diego University and a PhD in art history from the University of Illinois, Chicago. She has previously curated work at the Cornell Fine Arts Museum, the San Diego Museum of Art, and Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami, among others. She's taught art history at Columbia College, Chicago, DePaul University, Rollins College, and the University of Illinois, Chicago. In 2017, she received the President's Award for Diversity and Inclusion at Rollins College. We encourage you to visit the current exhibits at the Frost Art Museum, including Tesoro, Raphael Soldi, I might be saying that wrong, In the Mind's Eye, and Rembrandt Reframed. Thank you, Amy Galpin, for leading today's session, Remixed or Reimagined, the Future of Museums.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me here for this special session of TTR, and thank you to all of you for spending your lunch hour thinking a little bit about museums. I'm curious, by a show of hands, how many of you have been to a museum in the last 6 months? That's good. How many of you have ever been to the Frost Art Museum? That's pretty good. Awesome. Well, as Michelle mentioned, I work at the Frost Art Museum. It's right here on campus. We're open Tuesday through Sunday, 11 to 5, and we have free admission. And we're about a 5-minute walk from where we're standing right now. You know, COVID has brought a lot of attention on the ways in which we are living our lives. You know, are we working too much? Is working from home better than working in the office? How are we physically taking care of ourselves? The last 2 years have also brought further attention to racial injustice, to systemic inequity, and we are reevaluating our institutions, our government, our universities, our museums, and wondering, can they be remixed or do they have to be completely reimagined? I wanted to share with you a little bit about what I submitted. This is kind of the summary of what I said I would talk about today. And then also just emphasizing what Michelle mentioned, this idea that you're invited to participate, to ask questions along the way. You don't have to wait to the Q&A. And I'm going to ask you some questions as well. I think, you know, today, how many of you read the New York Times article for today? Anyone? So the article was about ways in which the museums in general, can reshape their programming, their exhibitions, their collections, their efforts in a post-COVID era. So many museums closed. You know, the Frost Art Museum only closed for a few months. FIU asked that we reopen early. We were one of the first departments on campus to open. I was working from home maybe 3 months before I was back full-time at the facility, and we opened about 4 or 5 months after the pandemic had began in March of 2020. But some museums were closed for 2 years. Particularly, for example, museums in California, museums in Los Angeles, where the COVID restrictions were more strict. And so a lot of museums turned to digital programming. And as we come back in person, museums are wondering, do we continue digital? Do we continue in person? What are our attendance numbers looking like? A lot of museums, the attendance numbers are not coming back as strongly as they once were. Some of that might be a hesitancy on the part of people to gather, to be in public, but some of that might be further a call for museums to reconsider business as usual. From the 10 points in the New York Times article by Jason Farago about ideas for museums in a post-pandemic age, I distilled it into kind of four main ideas: labor, collections, digital, and communities. So where do museums begin? You know, when you think about a museum, like what kind of words come to mind? Yeah. Art, yes. History, yes. Learning, yeah. Expression, yeah, definitely. And all of those things can exist within a single museum, right? You can be an art museum, but you can be a museum that has an exhibition on art connected to the Vietnam War. Why do you think sometimes people don't like to go to museums? Maybe we all agree that we love to go to museums, but yes, go ahead.
There's this sort of like pretentious stereotype about going to a museum.
Right, that people feel excluded. What are ways in which museums like give off that pretentious vibe? Anyone? Some people say it starts with the architecture itself. You know, if you think of like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Louvre in Paris, even our Frost Art Museum sometimes looks like a missile silo. It doesn't look very warm and friendly, like, hey, I'm welcome here, I belong here. Another thing is the way in which museums often talk about things, like the language. At the Frost Art Museum, we think a lot about the labels that we write. We're not perfect, so I'm sure there are labels that could be better and improved upon. But I think there's an idea that if you need a dictionary to understand the label text, well, then maybe you're not feeling very welcomed by a particular space. A couple of summers ago, we did a survey at the Frost Art Museum, and we found out that a huge percentage of our visitors, 70% of our visitors over a week in June, 2 summers ago, it was the first time they had ever been to a museum. Not just an art museum, the first time they had been to a museum in general. So that's further a call to make your language, right, accessible. And, I'm an art historian, I'm a museum curator, I love big ideas, but if people can't understand my ideas, then there's not a lot of point of putting together an exhibition that's just for me and my friends. So that's another thing that museums can do. It actually happened to me yesterday. Someone was talking to me about an exhibition idea, and it's a great idea. They're a student here at FIU, and it's an important exhibition, but I was having trouble understanding. What would this look like? Why would people come? How would they connect with the topic? So those are important things we have to think about, because museums do have this kind of aloof, inaccessible reputation. And part of that is their beginnings. The people who founded museums were often very wealthy. They were people who had enough means to collect objects. Have you ever heard of a cabinet of curiosity? Cabinet of Curiosity is kind of the genesis of early museums. Not always literally cabinets, but sometimes cabinets. People would bring together objects from their travels or that had been given to them, that were created by different cultures and in different time periods, and put them on exhibit in their home. You're looking at an image right now of Charles Wilson Peale. He was a founder of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. In his own personal museum, which he exhibited in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, is considered to be one of the first museums in this country. He raised a family of painters. He taught his children, their partners, their spouses, about the principles of art making. And they're kind of an early U.S. Dynasty of painters, the Peale family. But you can see here it's this kind of luxurious red curtain, this kind of drama of lifting up what's behind the curtain. And you see various objects. In the foreground, you have taxidermy and bones, so this reference to science. In the background, you have all of these different paintings, some depicting wildlife, others depicting portraits. Portraiture is also another way in which we have this reinforcing of the idea of who is a museum for or who is art for. Some of the earliest portraits created in this country, for example, were about status and wealth, reinforcing the significance of your family and of your place in society. So museums, of course, we have a lot of work to do, right? If we really want to be spaces for learning, for art, for engagement, and for history. Recently as August of this year, the International Council of Museums redefined what a museum is. It was a 10-month-long process, if you can imagine people just debating about what a museum is and the particular peculiarities of the definition. A museum is a not-for-profit, permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage. Open to the public, accessible, and inclusive, museums foster diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. A A lot of this definition had already existed, but the part that's in bold is what was recently added. So open to the public, accessible, and inclusive. Museums foster diversity and sustainability. You know, sustainability is a very interesting thing for museums. We put up exhibitions, we take them down, we frame objects, and then what do we do when we unframe those objects or don't need those pedestals anymore? We paint galleries over and over again. We have events. People on campus, for example, can rent the Frost Art Museum, and we can yield huge bags and bags and bags of trash after these events. So museums are not excused, right, from thinking about environmental sustainability. As a part of this series of TTR, you know, it's really important for us to talk about the issues that museums are facing right now. And one of them comes from within, the issue of labor. Not-for-profit workers being paid an equitable wage, being given the benefits that their corporate contemporaries also receive. Very recently, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, their union, went on strike for 19 days, and it was just resolved about a week and a half ago. Had anyone heard of this at all? One thing that the union was very successful in doing is leveraging social media. And also sometimes with quite a sense of humor. They went to Twitter, they went to Instagram, and they started to get all of these cultural workers to follow them and repost what was happening in Philadelphia. They went on strike because they had a new director who started. The day the new director started, they went on strike. For 3 years, they had been fighting for increased wages. They had been fighting for parental leave and 3 other particular components of their labor contract. And for 19 days, they marched outside of the museum. And here is a picture of the Philadelphia Museum, and you see the signs say fair contract now. It's a wall-to-wall union, so as long as you're not managing someone within the Philadelphia Museum of Art, you're included within the union itself. Philadelphia Museum of Art is not alone. The new museum in New York, their employees have formed a union. Recently, the Brooklyn Museum is also becoming unionized. And during the strike of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum workers in solidarity also staged a strike or a protest. Here's an example of ways in which social media was leveraged, both for the good and for the bad. You see on the left, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, their union, kind of illustrating what they wanted and their very clear demands. And it was widely criticized. The Philadelphia Museum of Art decided to shut down the comments during the strike. Why do you think they shut down the comments on the Philadelphia Museum of Art's social media platforms during the strike of the workers? Yeah?
Bad publicity.
Bad publicity, right? People were really going after them in the comments. They would be posting like, come and see this amazing picture by Mary Cassatt. And people would be filling the comments, you know, support your workers, pay your workers an equitable wage. So you're right. They wanted to avoid the problem. They wanted to distract from it. And it was really bad publicity. They said it was to protect their staff. Which just further, it just became almost like comedy on Twitter. People were really going after the Philadelphia Museum of Art. You know, before we think about how we can remix or perhaps completely reimagine museums, we do have to think about the people inside. The people working the museum, the people that greet you when you come to a museum, the security officer who watches the galleries, the accountant, the marketing manager, and of course the curatorial team as well. Another thing that was emphasized in the collection, or in the article for today, was about objects. That what museums should also focus on in a post-COVID era is their own collections. One of the reasonings of the author, Jason Farago from the New York Times, was that if museums are struggling financially, why not use what you have? Why not leverage the collections that you have in your museums? When you go to museums, what type of art do you like to see on view? What moves you? What interests you the most? It can be a type of art. It can be a time period. Yes? Surrealism, definitely. Modern art, yeah. Impressionism, the quick, fluid brushstrokes, right? I mentioned Mary Cassatt earlier. She's an impressionist. Yes? Environmental landscapes. And landscapes that depict nature, and also landscapes that relate to climate change and social justice. That's really great. You know, I think it's really important to ask people, you know, what do you want to see? What objects are important to you? And if those of us who are in the museum field, if we don't get an answer from what objects are important to you, then we have to scale even farther back. You know, what is important to you? The image that you see on the screen right now, I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's the third floor of the Frost Art Museum. It's an installation called Tesoro, and it was curated by Pepe Mar. He is an artist from Mexico. He's lived here in Miami for more than 20 years. He's also a graduate of FIU. And we invited him to spend about a year with us at the museum, going through our vaults, working with our graphic designer, our install team, to reimagine our permanent collection, to demystify that the curator, the art historian, is the only person who can tell a story from the collection. We invited Pepe to, as I said, reimagine and create this installation, which he called Tesoro. And for him, it's like walking into a 3D collage. You're in the first gallery right now, which he views as a chapter. He also calls it Mirror, Mirror. You can see there's a mirror on the right-hand side of the wall where people can see themselves within the larger collection of the museum. Another very significant issue happening right now in museums is repatriation. We're talking about the returning of objects to countries from which the objects originated from. Objects that may have been stolen or sold under precarious and unjust circumstances. And just this month, in October, the Smithsonian Museum, along with the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island, had a ceremony in Washington, D.C. to honor the returning of a number of works of art from Benin, returning them to now what is contemporary Nigeria. These efforts are years in the making, but they're really crucial. You know, museums have to look inside their collections. They have to look and say, how did we acquire this? How did the person who gave us this work acquire this? And then how did they keep going back, and keep going back until you get an answer that satisfies, right, industry standard practices. A big effort has been made to return specifically Benin artifacts, Benin heads, one of which you see on the screen here, which were pillaged and stolen from the Benin Kingdom, originally by the British Empire, and then were spread through the circulation of the art market. So for example, there's a lot of museums here in the US that have these Oba heads from the Benin Kingdom. Pretty soon, Nigeria is going to launch something called Digital Benin, and 135 museums have contributed their records and images of Benin art and artifacts to this digital archive, because it's important to make it public, right? We may not be responsible for exactly how these objects came here. You know, these objects may have come 30 years to a museum before the current team arrived, but we do have a responsibility to right these historic wrongs, right? And to reach out and to participate in a process of repatriation. So labor and collections, right? Really key ways in which museums need to rethink and reimagine their existence. Another big thing happening in museums right now related to collections is also people selling their collections. In some cases, some museums are selling works of art because they want to buy other works of art that will allow for a more diverse and inclusive narrative. In this case, MoMA recently announced that they were going to sell $70 million worth of art to support digital platforms, which was met with some controversy. Traditionally, museums were only allowed to sell their art if they meant buying other works of art. But during the pandemic, those rules, the American Association of Museum Directors eased those rules because they wanted to help museums, particularly museums that charge admission and that have rentals like weddings and cafes that were all shut during COVID. They wanted to give them another lifeline. So maybe you don't have to let go of staff, or you can keep caring for your collection. The Museum of Modern Art in New York is very different than the Frost Art Museum here at FIU. It has vast resources. When they're thinking about selling their art, they're like, we have 10 Pablo Picassos, which one can we let go of? Their problems are not, for example, my problems as a chief curator at the Frost Art Museum. But it's certainly interesting to think about, is if we're moving in more of a digital age, if we're finding that museums are not withstanding the same attendance that they did pre-pandemic, do we need to move into digital, and do we need to look at our collections as a resource? Your article for today cautions against this, and I have to say, I'm a little concerned too, but it doesn't mean I'm against it. I'm still mulling it over. But this idea of selling collections, right, to support digital efforts. One of the things that we do as museum professionals is when work is acquired into the collection, we're supposed to care for it in perpetuity. So forever. And this idea of deaccessioning can certainly be a sensitive one. So beyond labor, collections, I'm already into this third area of digital. I'm curious, how many of you have gone to like an immersive experience? Like, have any of you gone to the Van Gogh immersive experience or the Monet immersive experience? Yeah, quite a few of you. Anyone want to share like what they liked about it, or maybe what they didn't like about it? Yeah, up there at the top.
Like I'm at the center of attention of the artwork, so it makes me feel like I'm within the artwork. So you can imagine that you're one with the art, and I just find that fascinating and amazing.
Mm-hmm. 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 These experiences, particularly the Van Gogh experience, right? I noticed you raised your hand. They can also be very expensive, right? So going to Super Blue, going to the Van Gogh, going to the Manet experience, they can be $50 a ticket. But they're definitely attracting a lot of people. So museums have to think about, where can we meet in the middle on this? Maybe it might be difficult to create the type of immersive digital experience you see at Van Gogh at the Frost Art Museum, but are there other ways we can reach a digital audience? Go ahead.
I worked with the Perez Art Museum, and we had to, as the dancers, we went and we viewed multiple times certain pieces, and based on our emotions, we had to choreograph dances around that piece and involve that piece of artwork. And then we performed them, and they kind of invited this really cool, like, different experience because we were dancing around the artwork, we were dancing around the people viewing the artwork, and it was just a beautiful collaboration. And I think I want to believe the Frost does that with music. So doing that, I think, really creates maybe not a digital experience, but an experience that is more than just like sight. It's feelings. I think creating that is really unique.
I love what you're saying, and what you're describing is really mixing both. It's bringing together this desire for immersive experience, but saying that the immersive experience doesn't only have to be digital. And you're right, we have done that at the Frost Art Museum, and maybe I'll do a little plug. November 5th, we have an event, 4:30 p.m. New York Marquez, a professor in the Honors College, is going to be creating a dance performance in Tesoro in the exhibition that I mentioned. And then this Saturday at 3 and 4, the Florida Grand Opera will be performing in our exhibition In the Mind's Eye, Landscapes of Cuba. But I really like what you're saying, and I do think by bringing in dance, collaborating with poets, collaborating with orchestras, you can build on your audience. And it was also something that was suggested. I ended up not emphasizing it, but it was suggested in the New York Times article as another way for museums to reinvent themselves is to partner with other organizations, artists, institutions, to kind of increase their audiences. So I really appreciate that. And we've been dabbling more and more in dance, and the feedback has been very, very positive. I juxtapose this, amazing Van Gogh experience that you can have with our app at the Frost Art Museum. So if you go to the App Store and you search Frost Art Museum, you can download for free the Frost Art Museum app, and you'll find our virtual tours. You'll also find audio guides, and this is just a screenshot here where you can see the audio guide for In the Mind's Eye and Raphael Soldi's A Body in Transit, two of our current exhibitions. How do you think I can get more people to check out the app? What's the best way to reach students at FIU about the app? Is the app, is it old school? Is it not useful? Juxtaposed with this Van Gogh image, it feels very old school, but yeah, I'm curious.
So I don't personally use the app, but definitely the way how you distribute it and how you advertise it, definitely through social media like Instagram, what a lot of people have. Definitely having posters around high traffic areas. I feel like in those certain cases, because this is the first time I actually am aware of the app. So I'm assuming I may know more of it because many of us are on social media all the time. So using those platforms, being very critical, which in like high traffic areas that can expose it to many students, I feel like can really help out with the app, and maybe have more people to give you feedback on the app and how to improve it.
Yeah. One thing I definitely know I need to do is create a survey or a quiz on the app. So after you listen to an audio guide, or even after you play with the app for a little bit, to have that pop up, because we're not really getting feedback. We get the number of downloads, but not the feedback itself. Why do you think it was important for us as an institution to add audio guides to our offerings? Accessibility, absolutely. We want to have more than just a visual experience. We're an art museum, but it doesn't have to start and stop with looking. So the app was really also a mechanism for us to start with audio guides. And the app does many other things. It has this aspect where you can hover over a work of art and it can send you to different websites. To be honest, it's something that we haven't fully developed. And this happens a lot at museums, especially smaller museums. Some of the bigger institutions I've name-checked today, like the Brooklyn Museum or the Metropolitan Museum of Art, they have huge departments dedicated to digital. I skipped over it, but this is an amazing project. It's just one of like 20 amazing projects that you can find on the Metropolitan Museum of Art's website. It's called The Artist Project, and it interviews different contemporary artists about works in the collection. And they're really highly produced, short spots that you can find if you Google The Artist Project on the Met's website. But what happens at smaller institutions, smaller non-for-profits, the bandwidth is already small. You may or may not have someone who is tech savvy. And so it's important to come together. For example, at the Frost Art Museum, we may not be tech experts, but we all use social media. So thinking how we can leverage our phones. This app, for example, can be edited from our phones, from our computers, making things be as accessible not only for the audience, but also for the staff who may not be software engineers. Lastly, my kind of fourth group I wanted to talk to you about. So we started with labor, we went to collections, we talked about digital. I also wanted to bring up communities. Museums tend to throw around the word communities a lot. We serve the community. We're here for the community. But sometimes museums use those terms and we're not even quite sure who the community is, or how we can serve them. So I think I mentioned surveys, focus groups are really important to us at the Frost, as are individual conversations. At any given time, we probably have 14 students that work at the museum. That's a great number of people to ask, what do you want at the museum? How can we do better? I've even gotten some great information from some of you today, or all of you today. I recently attended a digital leadership conference, and something that they said to me fascinated me. They said after 15 people, surveys become less and less useful because you start getting repetition of responses. And so instead, what they encourage is museums to sit with 15 community members and talk to them in depth. Talk to them for an hour and 15 minutes. Go really deep and get a lot of content and information, but not constantly having these very quick multiple choice surveys. Because if you have 200 multiple choice surveys, you're going to start getting the same responses. I wanted to share a little bit with you about why I chose these images that you're looking at the screen. We're back in Tesoro here. You see one of our summer campers that visited the museum in July. They're standing in front of the mirror. My colleague Amaris is on the floor chatting with them. They're talking about what they see in the work. This was through a grant we got from the Parker Foundation around an Andy Warhol work. It's in the installation, but hard to see, and it says, "Are you different?" So all summer, we welcome summer campers to talk about the idea of difference, how we acknowledge difference, how we celebrate difference through our programming. In preparing for today, I was looking for more images in the galleries, and I happened upon the image in your lower right. And I thought, oh, this is a good one for today, thinking about communities. The man seated at the chair, his name is Alfred Allen Lewis, and this was his 90th birthday party that happened at the museum. Alan's partner died about 7 or 8 years ago. The pandemic has been particularly tough on him. He lives mostly alone, occasionally seeing his caregiver. And this was one of the first times that he came out to a public event to honor his birthday this past June. In terms of being a museum worker and a cultural worker, we're all educators and we're also caregivers. If we want to create community, if we want to reach community, we have to treat our donors, our student visitors, as individuals and seek to meet their needs. And then the image on the top, where communities, I mentioned labor, I started within. But, we come together, no exhibition is produced without, it takes a village. It literally takes a village. And this is a picture of two of our part-time temporary art handlers, Richie and Anthony. And you're seeing a hand of Juan Pablo. They're all artists. They all live and work in Miami, and to support their practices, they work at museums on a part-time temporary basis when they need help installing the art. They're also our community. I love asking them, what do you think of this exhibition? What do you think of this installation? What's going on in the community? What are you hearing from other artists? The artist's voice is such an important part of what we do. And if we want to reach out, we also have to reach within our community. These are a few other examples of different community initiatives at the museum, both big and small. The image on the left, I love this image, and as a curator, it has nothing to do with art. It's not in the museum. There's no artwork. It was taken at an open mic night event that we had at the museum in February. It was our first big event for students following the pandemic, and we were overwhelmed. At something like 110 students came to our back patio and either performed or enjoyed music, spoken word, poetry, statements. There was a comedian. But I loved the way these students were interacting with one another, looking at one another, enjoying one another. And for me, that event was also just about creating space for students to be together. And it doesn't always have to be about the art and the exhibitions. Maybe those students will come back another time. Maybe they filtered into the galleries after the open mic night. Something else that has been, a bit of a surprise to me. As a curator, I try to spend a lot of time in the galleries or go to programs that maybe I'm not as involved in, like Family Day, to see how do people interact with our museum. Again, what do they need? What do they want? We had some success with chalkboard walls. We had an exhibition on Coconut Grove a couple summers ago, and we had a chalkboard wall in the hallway, and it said, what does place mean to you? Or what's your favorite place? And some people responded very seriously. Some people just made fun drawings. Some people wrote Patria Vida. It was not necessarily in response to the question, but it made me realize how much people like making their mark and being given an opportunity to contribute. So on the first floor of our museum, we have this pink chalkboard wall where people can draw anyone who comes in. There's no particular prompt. And one day in September, I went in and I found these two comments, and I loved both of them. One documenting a young visitor's very first museum visit in September of this year. And then the other, a very personal text, which I don't know how well some of you can read it, but you can't read it. But it's someone saying they came to the museum, it was their birthday, they didn't have anyone to celebrate with, and they wanted to take their mind away from the fact that their family and friends were far away. And so, you never know the type of space that is needed or the type of space that you can create, right, until it's there. For me, the idea that museums are also hopefully a type of sanctuary where people can feel very welcome to be alone. You don't have to go. You can go with friends, like our guests in the middle, but you can also go and have that personal, reflective experience. I recently went to Montgomery, Alabama. It was my second trip to Montgomery. Anyone been to Montgomery, Alabama? Oh, yay. How recently have you been to Montgomery?
It was a group thing where we went and we were able to go to the Rosa Parks Museum and the Legacy Museum.
Yes.
So it was really interesting and a very interesting experience, and it was very heavy too.
Yeah.
With, everything that they show, and they have to preserve like the history of something that is not very much spoken of in the U.S.
Absolutely. I mean, you've just said it so perfectly. So in Montgomery, Alabama, there's a museum and a monument. Well, there's multiple museums, but in the last 4 years, a new monument and then subsequently museum was opened in Montgomery. As a part of the efforts of the Equal Justice Initiative, have any of you ever heard of Bryan Stevenson and the book Just Mercy, where it was also made into a movie with Michael B. Jordan playing? I see some heads nodding, yes. The Equal Justice Initiative looks at the issue of mass incarceration. It looks at wrongful convictions, over sentencing in our justice system. And Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer. He's not originally from Alabama, but he moved to Alabama, moved to Montgomery. He's a longtime resident. And one of the things that EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative, started researching, that was compelled to research, was the history of lynchings in this country. And the fact that so few people who grow up in the US know that history, know the names of individuals who were killed in their community as a result of racial terror. So he wanted to create a monument and a museum. And you're seeing the Legacy Museum, which documents the atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade and then goes all the way up to the contemporary present with artwork as well as discussing mass incarceration. And then you also see an image of the monument, the National Monument for Peace and Justice, which it's an incredible experience to walk through. And you're seeing all of these pillars here that have the names of people who were lynched and the counties they were lynched in the United States. It is at once an experience that is very much about being in this particular place, being in Montgomery, having that immersive experience in person without digital. But they also leverage digital in the installation in a lot of powerful ways. You're not allowed to take pictures in the museum, which I think is a powerful choice in a lot of ways. I have my phone right here, right? We're so addicted to our phones. To be asked, no, you can't take pictures, right? To have that tension, to focus and to be present. It's also because they don't want people to take pictures of certain artifacts, certain texts in the exhibition and then ultimately use them in nefarious ways. This image, though, is from their website. And what you're looking at is this experience in the museum where you can walk up to these two men and other individuals in the exhibition, and you pick up the phone, and you have the experience of hearing their story and talking to them as though you were visiting them in a jail or in a prison. There are various animations, digital touch screens, incredibly powerful short films throughout this museum that really weave and emphasize the digital in powerful ways. On the right is a sculpture by Hank Willis Thomas. You can see I was able to visit sort of right at sunset, and so the shadows that were cast over this sculpture were really incredibly moving. I know you all have to go, and my time is winding down, although we do have some time for questions and answers. But I wanted to share and kind of close a little bit with that experience of being at the Legacy Museum. As someone who's worked in museums for 20 years, I just felt not only, as you had mentioned, just how important it was to be present for the history and the stories being told, but I was also really impressed with how the story was told, and how they really thought about in creating a new museum. How are we going to serve this community? How are we going to serve diverse audience members in both digital and in person, and create an immersive space that was driven by art and objects, but also very much acknowledging people. At the end, I just want to say that, museums are not neutral. We began with that image of Charles Wilson Peale. Charles Wilson Peale is not neutral in the stories of the history of museums of this country. We all come with bias and subjectivities and our own learned experiences. And so it's important for each museum to interrogate its own past and to interrogate who we want to be. Moving forward. I hope that we can remix museums, but some days I do wonder if we have to completely reimagine them because of the colonial structures that created them. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that museums are basically for society and built by society. So, and there was a problem with labor and paying all those workers and everything that goes financially. So I was thinking, this is just a thought, and I would like your opinion on it. What do you think we could do? So I was thinking maybe instead of having like jury duty, we could have like museum duty. So having people, like instead of going to jury, they could go and help out the museum. And I would just like to, your opinion on it and if it could actually be played out.
Well, I love that idea. I think it's a great idea. And especially, for the museums that people pay. You pay, if you're a taxpayer in certain communities, your taxes are in part going to select museums in your community. I keep sort of saying select because some museums, for example, are private. And a lot of museums receive money from Miami-Dade County, for example, or from the state of Florida. So thinking about incorporating that. One of the things I think is challenging, and I'd love to hear if you have any ideas or if anyone else has other ideas, is kind of bringing together government and the arts. I don't think anywhere is perfect, but I have certainly seen other examples where government and visual arts are more tied together, or when visual arts are more part of the fabric of society. I've spent a lot of time in Mexico City, and I remember one time my job was, I was escorting a painting. I was the courier of a painting from the San Diego Museum of Art to the Palacio de Bellas Artes in DF. And when I went through, the customs officials were asking me what I was doing, and they knew about the exhibition that was coming up. They're like, we can't wait to see it. We're going to go Magritte at the Palacio de Bellas Artes. And the people I stayed with were computer programmers, and they knew about the exhibition. And in certain places, like for example, in Denmark and in Sweden, there are huge government programs that support the arts. Also, as I mentioned, in Mexico, there's a lot of government support for the arts. And for some reason, I feel like in this country, arts are kind of always here and not as integrated into our culture. So I think it would take convincing our politicians to make it more a part. But I love the idea of museum visits as opposed to jury duty. Yes?
Are mixed reality, extended reality type exhibits? And if not, are you guys looking at doing stuff like that?
That's a great question. So currently what we have is on our website, we have 18 to 20 digital tours. And if you go to frost.fiu.edu, under digital experiences, you can see the tours. They're powered by Matterport technology. So have you ever seen those like real estate tours? So it's similar, but they do work with VR. So you can wear glasses and sort of have that experience. The tech is a little bit clunky, but it has been something that's really fun to do. We started doing it actually before the pandemic. We had a handful of tours. An artist had approached us about creating them, and we thought, sure, why not? Let's go for it. His name is Zach Balber. And then we began then during the pandemic wanting to do more and more and more. And we've kind of been currently discussing, like, now, I mean, the pandemic isn't over, but, you know, do we want to stop doing these? But we plan to continue them. And we also want to explore with our app, the Museum app that I mentioned, our Frost Art Museum app, more VR. You know, I'm curious, as a student, is that something that would interest you more if we had that?
That'd be cool, and like just like and do like mixed reality, where it'll like you can hold it up and it'll say, okay, this is who it's by, like this is who painted it, and like their picture will pop up on the side, and oh, this is an impressionist piece and stuff like that. I think that could be cool.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback, because I do think it's encouragement to develop in more of that space. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, I also like to add on top of that, I definitely believe in continuing the digital platform and all that, and continuing with the app, just because, you know, for some students, right, we have a lot in our schedules, we have our organizations to go to, we have our own classes, events as well to go to, just like these ones, and they probably will come back home exhausted, tiring. So having these digital experiences can really help make it at least feel like you're not committing yourself fully, but still having, you know, all that, you know, artworks and seeing everything, so that, you know, it's in the comfort of their own home, so that they can really, you know, experience it all, and just to feel, you know, just be able to show what the art museum wants them to see and all that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's also almost like digital is an introduction, too. If you only have so much time, this can be an easier way to navigate the museum's content.
Exactly, yes. It can make its pathway, and then if they are more interested enough, or they feel like that, you know, this is something that they really like, that they're willing to dedicate even more time, then they can transition to in-person to really get that full experience when they have the time.
Thank you.
On your question about how you can get the word out, a lot of organizations here do tablings events, and they get like the information of the students, like emails and phone numbers and all that stuff. So I was thinking maybe you could do a Frost Museum tabling, and get the information so you could do their surveys and all that stuff.
Thank you for that suggestion. You know, I know we have done it a little bit in the past, but it hasn't been consistent. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's something we need to do and show up and be there regularly. I was also walking through the other day, and I noticed like someone had like a Ferris wheel, like something very fun. I feel like we need to think of what our Frost Art Museum thing is on our table to bring in more people. But thank you for that. I'm going to talk to our team about doing it.
Hey, beautiful. Thank you so much. So it is 1:30. I know a couple students had to go. I imagine you guys are scheduling us between things that you're doing, so we appreciate you being here. Just as a reminder, tomorrow we do have that special Russian invasion of Ukraine student voices from Western Ukraine that you can register for at go.fiu.edu/Ukraine. And it's funny because we talked about this a little bit at today's session. You can join us again next week, where we'll have a panel doing the future workplace drivers and implications of unionization in the U.S. And we're going to have a couple of representatives from different perspectives, including someone that attempted to unionize a Starbucks over in Hialeah, and that's going to be really cool. So we'll have some faculty unions, some professors from different areas of study, and we're going to talk about the current movement in unionization across the U.S. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you again next week. Have a nice day.